Becoming an airline pilot does not have to be a six-figure endeavor. Regardless of what you see online, regardless of what you see big flight schools advertising and colleges for that matter, flight training is not a six-figure endeavor. It doesn't have to be, at least. You can do it significantly cheaper, and today I'm going to kind of break down those numbers for you. If you're new here, my name is Casey, and I'm a CFI with about 2 years of flight training experience as an instructor. I've been in the aviation industry for about 3 years now, as well as now I'm currently an airline pilot. I've worked with about 150 students in total, and I've worked with over a dozen students outside of the big schools to do it a significantly cheaper way, and today that's going to be the entire point of the video. How cheap can you become an airline pilot? What licenses do you need? And what can you actually do to kind of lower those costs and do it as efficiently and financially responsibly as possible? All right, let's start off by talking about what you actually need to become an airline pilot. What ratings do you need? Well, there's 4 basic ratings that you absolutely need to have. It's going to be your private, your instrument, your commercial, and your commercial multi. You have to get them, so we're going to break down how to do it cheaply. The ones that you are kind of optionally allowed to get are going to be the different instructor ratings, right? So I mentioned that I'm a CFI MEI. There's 3 ratings that I have. We're not going to dig super deep into them. 90% of people that become airline pilots go the instructor route. It's probably a higher stat than that. I made that up, but most people are going to go the instructor route. I'm not going to make this video about that topic. I'm just going to assume you're going that route, but if you need kind of motivation to do it, look up a different video on the different ways of becoming an airline pilot in terms of jobs to hitting your 1,500 hours or paying for them or whatever. But we're just going to assume efficiently and budget-wise, you're becoming an instructor and getting paid for most of your hours. The only other requirement for your ATP is going to be an hour requirement. And with that hour requirement is the big one of 1,500, which is why we mentioned getting a CFI job and becoming an instructor yourself. But there's also a bunch of little sub-hour requirements: cross-country time, PIC time, instrument time, night time, and the big one is going to be your multi-engine time. You'll notice if you ever look up the FAR requirement to get your ATP certificate, it says you need 50 hours of multi-engine, which is true. But when you're actually at airline training, you get more than 25 hours of simulator jet time, which actually legally counts. You really only need 25 hours of multi. The more you have, the better your resume looks. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to talk about only hitting that 25-hour requirement and what licenses will kind of come with that. All right, so you'll notice we switched over to the computer view. Currently, I have open a Google Sheet. This is a free sheet. It's linked down below. You guys are welcome to open it up and make a copy yourself. You don't have to put any information in. It's just there. I actually made it for my students initially, and you guys are welcome to make a copy of it and use it for your own numbers. Within it, you're going to be able to, anything that's highlighted, you can edit. I mean, you can edit anything, but anything that's highlighted is what I would recommend editing. How much your instructor charges for flight time, how much they charge for ground time, how much the plane costs per hour. And you'll notice if you plug these numbers in, let's just say your plane was 150 an hour, you'll notice all of these update based on whatever you put in here. So with that, this is the cost of the planes and how much I charge as an instructor in Utah. This is the total cost. It's $49,757 approximately, right? You also notice that's 292 hours of flight time that you're going to pay for before you're just fully instructing. Now, some of this is kind of up for debate on how you do it. The way that I'm going to recommend it is going and getting each one of these licenses yourself, one-on-one with your private instructor or your instructor privately. I'm quickly going to kind of break down how it all works so you guys can look at it yourself a little bit more. But you'll notice anything that needs a written test is going to have either Sporty Study Buddy or Shepherd's Air. Sporty Study Buddy is a $15 app on the App Store. Rote memorize all of the questions, and you can take your written exam and finish it relatively quickly. You can do it up to 2 years before your check ride. One of the first things I would do. I'd probably do an online ground school while doing Sporty Study Buddy early on in your training. Online ground school, the reason that all of them are going to have one linked is that I typically recommended my students to self-teach the ground stuff so they don't have to pay for a lot of ground instruction time. Since ground instruction, like even 10 hours with me was $500, it's typically cheaper to do an online ground school and then do some ground instruction with your instructor one-on-one to confirm you're ready for your check ride, but for them not to teach you everything. There's a lot of knowledge, a lot of information that you need to know to become a pilot for every one of your ratings. If your instructor sits down with you and teaches you everything, it might take 20, 30, 40, 50 hours. And if they charge for it, which most instructors do, that adds up really quick. So I'd really recommend just doing an online ground school, kind of going through that route, and then have your instructor check at the end. Besides the private, you have Shepherd's Air for every single one of them. The different ones cost different. Most of them cost a different amount for each one. But I would just go through this sheet and kind of take a look at it that way. You also notice some of these are going to have time splitting numbers, so not all of your flight time needs to be one-on-one with an instructor. Some of it, like your private, you're going to do some solo. And instrument, I put in here a lot of time splitting time. So you need a cross-country time when you're actually doing your instrument rating of 50 hours. To get that, the easiest way to do it, or the cheapest, most efficient way to do it, is do a little bit of teaching or like instruction with your instructor. Learn kind of about instrument flying, and then find a friend to time split with, and you guys can do cross-country flights where you practice all of that instrument stuff and kind of get better at it, as well as building the time needed for both your instrument rating cross-country requirements as well as the 250 hours towards your commercial. Legally speaking, you're getting a lot more time than you really need to towards your instrument rating if you do it this way, but you're going to need to get that time later on anyway for your commercial rating. So this is how I would recommend you go about it to do it as efficiently as possible. Do quite a bit of time in your instrument phase. You're going to get 74 hours total of time splitting. Only 37 of that counts cross-country time. If you don't know how time splitting works, look up a video as you kind of get to that point. You can only log half of the cross-country time. So you fly one way, the other guy flies one way. You only get to log the cross-country time for one of the routes, but you get to log most of the flight time, or at least all of your flight time, and then the time that your other person that's flying with you is under foggle. So it's a significantly cheaper way of doing it. I'm not going to go into like how it works entirely, but there's videos on that as well. The other things that are going to be a really big factor on here are going to be your commercial hitting your 250. You'll notice you don't need a lot of instruction with your actual instructor to make this one happen, right? You can do a lot of this with time splitting. You can do a lot of solo. Well, you have to do 10 hours of solo. And there's not a lot of ground time because there's not a lot of information for your commercial. It's mostly private information with a couple extra little commercial things. So you don't need to spend a lot of time with your instructor to learn the commercial stuff. So maybe this is one of those that's optional and you just do a little extra time with your instructor, or you do the online ground school and you and your instructor can do a mock or two and probably call it good if you actually studied properly. Now, the commercial multi, there's no hour requirement, right? So you can do it in as little as 4 hours. Now, I recommend at least 8 hours. That way you're as comfortable as you possibly can be, because any rechecks, like if you fail a check ride and have to do it again, costs additional money, right? You have to do additional training, you have to do additional flight time, then you have to pay an additional check ride fee, you have to rent the plane for that check ride. It adds up really quickly. You really don't want to fail check rides. It also makes getting jobs harder, looks worse on your resume, everything else, right? So 8 hours would be the minimum that I would recommend you do for the multi-flight, but you guys can kind of play it by ear when you get to actually flying with your instructor. Now, you'll notice 8 hours is not the 25 you need for your ATP certificate, right? You can get your commercial multi in as little as 8 hours, or 9.5 if you do it with your check ride flight, right? So you can do it as little as 9.5 hours, right? So the dual flight, then your check ride comes out to 9.5 hours. Now, with that, you need about 15 and a half more hours to hit your 25 that you need for your ATP. Well, for your MEI rating, you need 15 hours of PIC. Well, if you do it with an instructor, you get 15 hours, or you get 15 hours of solo time in a multi, which probably isn't the best idea when you're still relatively new to the multi-engines. Even though you can get a license in 8 hours, doesn't really mean you should be flying the plane in 8 hours. You legally could, but it just depends on how comfortable you really are. But you can go up with your instructor for 15 hours to hit your ATP requirement, and that requirement would also give you the requirement to take a check ride to get your MEI rating. So for literally zero extra in terms of flying with an instructor, so you have to pay for the instructor. So it is a little extra, I guess. It's an extra $750. But if you're flying with an instructor anyway, then you already get the hours, you're already paying for them. They can sign you off to take an MEI check ride. That MEI check ride is an extra 1.5 hours of flight time, and it's a check ride cost, right? MEI check ride is usually an add-on. It's usually super quick. Most DPs are pretty cheap about it. So you could be, hypothetically, doing an extra rating for an extra $1,300. This one's not required, not really needed. You might not ever use it realistically. but it looks good on a resume. It might help you get a CFI job. You might actually get a student or two that flies multi, or you might get access to an MEI job where you actually fly multis all the time, and that will significantly help in the long run getting jobs. So if you can do it for an extra $1,000, it makes it really nice. So that pretty much breaks down all the costs as what they were costing my students. If you guys have questions, please leave them in the comments. I will go through every single one of them and give you guys an answer. If there's anything that you guys find missing from this sheet that you think might help somebody else out if I put it in here, also please let me know. With that, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys on the next one.